So what's for lunch?
Hello from Hawaii.
So people in Hawaii love food. Not only do they love eating it, but they love talking about it, they love sharing about it, and of course they love taking pictures of it. And I know that there's offices in Hawaii where the first thing they talk about is not work every day, but where they want to go for lunch. Hey, and don't act like you guys don't do that, okay? But have you ever stopped to think about why we local people love the food that we do? I mean, of course the burger tastes good, but there's more factors to it than that. And so I want to dive a little deeper into local food and talk about what I think makes it worth it to us. And when we talk about worth, we're talking about value, and that value is different for everyone. But I think I somewhat figured it out with a formula. Now hear me out. It's T plus Q plus C plus P times X equals value. Now that's taste plus quantity plus convenience plus price times an X factor makes it worth it for us. And when we're scanning the food court or we're looking at the menu, I think there's more that goes on than just, bruh, I stay hungry. Of course, I'll be speaking in generalities here with biases towards my own food preferences, but if you feel differently about local food, which I'm sure if you're local, I'm sure you do, then please let me know in the comments below. Let's talk about taste. I mean, the food gotta taste ono. In and of itself, it's probably not the most important factor, but it's the primary factor. And while there are 5 basic tastes, I think when you look at local food, we're primarily talking about salty foods and sweet foods. Take, for example, this Portuguese omelet sandwich. Whew, so good. You have the sweet outside bun juxtaposed with the salty, and I mean, it's pretty salty, Portuguese sausage. That's so good. I think about most of my favorite local foods. You got plate lunches, you got hurricane popcorn, you got kakimochi, taro chips. I mean, all kind of salty. And then when it comes to sweet foods, you got things like shave ice or all those pastries and mochis that we love. Like, this mochi sada. Oh, it's so good. I gotta make a video just about this guy because, that's so good. And so while taste is important, I actually think in Hawaii, the taste threshold for being good enough is actually quite low. I mean, yes, Hawaii has some fine dining, and I'm sure that there are food aficionados out there who can taste all the complex tastes and discern all of the flavors and how they mix. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself here. All I really need is some meat and some rice and a sweet dessert. I'm good. Okay, so next is the Q, and the Q stands for quantity. Not quality, but quantity. It doesn't mean that the quality is bad, it just, I think people they want to eat a lot of food. I mean, how many times have you heard the aunties complain? Hey, you know what? That plate's junk now. I mean, they used to give so much, but now my plate's so light. Lose money. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about quantity. I mean, it's one of the things that I have to get used to every time I go travel to Japan, because in Japan, it's not about quantity, it's more about the quality. And the best example I can think of is kaiseki in Japan. And if you haven't had kaiseki and you're from Hawaii, I recommend you try at least one time because they eat very different than us. You know, I mean, when you come to, local restaurant, right? Everybody sit down, everybody talk story, everybody order their food. All the food comes out one time, everybody eat, you guys talk story, and eventually everybody kind of migrates their way out to go and talk story in the parking lot. But when you go to Japan and eat a kaiseki meal, it's so different. Like the last kaiseki meal I had in Japan. We had this beautiful private room. It was like a half ballroom. It was just one long table. It was just our family, nobody else. Now I'm looking at the menu on the table, and of course I kind of read Japanese, but I can count, and so I'm counting the columns because I know, okay, that's how many courses are gonna be in this meal, and I'm counting like 10. So I know this is gonna be a 2 to 3 hour meal. Now the first dish they bring out, miso soup. I mean, perfect. We get miso soup back at Kikuya in Kaneohe, so I'm used to miso soup, but no more rice. And the next dish they bring out is this pork dish with one small piece of pork in this sauce. And it's pretty good, but you only get one piece. And of course, there's there's no more rice. And next they bring out this beautiful plate of sashimi, but of course I don't eat raw fish, so I just give it to my wife. And then got this crab and this hot pot thing, again, no more rice. And then they give one piece of tempura with this, looks like a sea snail, and I'm like, okay, but bruh, I could sure use 2 scoops of rice. And just when I had given up hope for rice, they bring out this small dish with a crab shell, and underneath is the crab meat, and finally, just a scoop of rice. Just one, but oh, it was so good. And of course, all the portions are small, and this meal is over the course of 2 hours. And not to sound ungrateful, because I know the meal is very special and very expensive, but just as a local guy here, born and raised, it's very different to quantity over quality. And when I think about quantity of food, I think about Zip Pack, which is my favorite plate lunch. I mean, it's kind of different when you eat it on a plate, but this is just for dining purposes only, just showing. But you got pretty much every meat you can think of. You got chicken, fish, pork, which is the Spam, and then you got terry beef, all on top of enough rice. I don't gotta ask for more rice. This is enough for me. And so to me, I think quantity is very important to local people, because they want to feel like what they're paying for is worth it, that they're getting enough food and that they feel full. Now next is convenience, and this is a much more pragmatic factor. How easy is it to access or eat that certain local food? Now for some people, they're willing to line up for that one mochi or that one sweet tea drink, and they go outside the door and they can wait. But for me, not so much. I mean, I'm more about convenience, because the things that I'm thinking about are how far I gotta drive and is there enough parking. Now maybe if you get 2 people in the car, it doesn't matter if you stop in that small mom and pop shop, you just jump out, go pick up stuff and jump back in the car. But if you're a solo driver by yourself, those are things that you gotta consider. But when it comes to local food, I do think about convenience. I think about those things because frankly, it factors in whether I think it's worth going there or not. I mean, you can have the best food, but if it's all the way in the North Shore, I'm probably not gonna drive there from town. And the last thing in this list is price. And I purposely put it towards the end because I actually don't think that it impacts our local choices as much as I think people think. And with rising costs in Hawaii as well as inflation, things are just gonna cost more. From the consumer side, we don't necessarily see that, but I'm sure from the producer side, from the restaurant or the business owner side, they see it. And so they have to make some really hard choices in terms of pricing. However, I don't think that the cost of food, especially when we talk about eat out local food, impacts consumer behavior as much as we think. Like, I don't think because something is too expensive, people are necessarily going to stop eating out. They might change how they purchase food in the grocery store, but I think we tend to be a people of habit, and eating out is just something that local people love to do, whether it's sit-down restaurant or takeout food or even just something as simple as fast food. I don't think that that changes all that much. I just think we find ways to adapt. I mean, yes, I noticed that the cost of some plate lunches has gone up. I mean, gone are the days when plate lunches were sub $10 and a mini was like, $6.95. But I have to ask myself, really, has that dissuaded me from eating that plate lunch? And if I took an honest look at how I spend my money, the answer is no. Because while price does play a factor into whether we buy something, I don't think it's the ultimate factor in determining whether this local food is something that we deem worth it to us. And so while things are getting more expensive in Hawaii, I don't think that's changed my own personal favorite foods and really my eating habits all that much. I just have to be more cognizant of it, and we do of course budget for that. But when I look out at how other people seem to be eating, it doesn't seem like things have slowed down. I gotta pause here before this one because I gotta take a bite into this. I mean, it's really hard to sit here and talk with all this food right in front of me. And the final thing in this whole equation is the X, or X factor, when it comes to food. And there's a reason why it's last, and that it is a multiplier. It's not an addition to, this is a multiplier, because I think when it comes to X factors for psychological or other reasons why we like certain foods, it's very illogical, it's very unreasonable, and we are willing to think that a food is worth it, even if everything else is not that great. It's not that high. It doesn't score very high in those things. If that X factor is high enough, it will overcome all those things, and that food will be worth it to us. Now, for many locals, this comes down to nostalgia or memories of a certain food. And it is the reason why that the Zippy's pumpkin pie is my absolute favorite dessert in Hawaii, because that X factor is just off the charts. Now, I dedicated an entire video to the Zippy's pumpkin pie, but just to summarize, the reason why I like this so much is because every time I'd come home from the mainland, my mom would have a Zippy's pumpkin pie for me. It's just something that she did, and so over the years, I just associate like coming home with the Zippy's pumpkin pie. And I'm willing to bet that for other people out there, there's a certain X factor that plays into a food being one of your favorites. It doesn't really make sense to other people, but it makes sense to you. And that's why that food is so special. Let me try some of this, by the way. It's like the perfect sweetness and spice, and it still tastes the same as when I was back in college. But why go through the trouble in all of this? Why not just eat the foods that we like, and why you gotta think so much about it? Okay, for a couple of reasons. First, I think it's important to be self-aware of not just ourselves, but our actions. Why do we do the things that we do? Why do we have preferences as locals to certain foods? Like, why do I grab the spam musubi at 7-Eleven instead of the hot dog or hamburger? And as I'm getting older, I'm recognizing that my food preferences are actually being passed along to my kids, because what I eat, my kids see, and so of course they eat. Now, this is really interesting for our family because my wife is from Japan, and so she also does the same thing. But Japanese people eat different types of foods, and so my kids are getting like this fusion of local food and Japanese food, which, by the way, is much healthier and has more vegetables. And second, in doing all of this, I think we can come to appreciate the local food that we have, because it may not always be here. Now, I'm not talking about all the restaurants that have closed in the past 5 years. I'm talking about the people who decide to leave Hawaii, who decide to move away from Hawaii. They're not gonna have access to local food, and so the food that you take for granted here, it may not be where you're going. Because sometimes I think we just like to consume and eat and take pictures, and we're so busy with the consumption of local food here that we don't take the time to really appreciate what it is that we have. I mean, the other day, me and my wife went to go out to eat, just the two of us, and it was so nice. I mean, I love my boys, but it was nice not to have to worry about the crayons and the, all that stuff. It was just the two of us. And I ordered the Keawe smoked pork chop and a side of hurricane season French fries. And boy, it was good. Not only did it just taste good, but I remember thinking, I cannot get this anywhere else. Like, you could make it somewhere else, right? But no restaurant outside of Hawaii is gonna do that. Why would they? And so I tried to really appreciate and take my time in eating that and enjoying the taste of those flavors, because I recognize that this is part of what makes the local food special, and I shouldn't be taking it for granted. And yes, local food is very ono and very special to us. But I do think it's important for us to reflect on why. Why do we think certain foods are so good? And let's remember to appreciate the foods that we do have, because they may not always be here. So thanks for watching, and aloha.